I used to be, for 27 years, employed by ExxonMobil. I retired last year. I got tired of scooping kitty litter. I got bored, and I came back to work for ExxonMobil, and I'm an independent consultant now, and that's why I worked with Suzanne for a good year and a half or whatever else like that. Okay? I have enough plaques and degrees to make me somewhat credible, but what I do have is 27 years of experience, and so I lean heavily upon that. Now, I want to really introduce a couple of terms which are winking in and out. The ones that are really important is consider the term Testware. I'm going to use that very generically as any type of test automation tool or any type of test management tool. You pick your tool. But I want to compare that to the term Shelfware, which is a slang term for those testing tools that you've tried, it's failed, and you've put them on the shelf. Now, there might be a couple of reasons that they're on the shelf. The first one is that you got started and you didn't have enough critical mass to get them into the industry, or into your corporation, your team, whatever it happened to be, just could not get up that curve to where enough people adopted it. If you're lucky enough to make it past that first curve and you're humming along, then the next hardest hill is the fact that you realize that these darn things have to be maintained. And that's when it becomes hard slugging again to try to keep that off the shelf. Now, some of you have probably seen other tools, had them in your companies, and I've seen my share of bringing things into the companies. And so those are the type of things we're going to talk about today. How do you achieve critical mass if you're getting started? How do you keep yourself moving forward if you're humming along with this and you realize you're working into a maintenance nightmare? I've coined a new term, backseat test automator. You've heard of a armchair quarterback? Well, a backseat test automator is your friend down the hall who tries to come and tell you how to automate tests, and they're still in this capture replayed mode, okay? All you have to do is punch this, record it, and play it back. And you wish that they would just go away, okay? Because they're going to be one of your worst enemies, and I'll explain why later. The last two terms are a mindset that we have endured for many, many years in the automation industry, and that is the fact that they say, well, just push the button. If it were only so simple that you could automate and push a button and everything would work magically, it would be great. And then, of course, you've heard there's no such thing as a silver bullet. I told you I was going to skip through historical. Don't have time for it, Lou. Went through year 2000. If you want to catch me for a funny story, come catch me for year 2000 story, okay? I was there. All right. Let me go back if I can do that. Sorry for flipping around, folks. I'm just trying, in the interest of time, to move forward. There, in my mind, are 4 reasons that you will hit Shelfware with your Testware. And I've listed them in order of priority. And I'm going to try to go through these in enough detail to where you get the sense of where you're going to hit your barriers, okay? The first one is underestimating your investment that you have to put in to achieve that critical mass or to get past that maintenance problem. The second one is all of these armchair quarterbacks and backseat test automators that try to tell the people who know what they're doing how to make tests, how to do these tests. The third one is something that, if you've been around long enough, you realize that we are still stubbornly clinging to some old value propositions. And we'll talk about what those are and how you're going to have to shift your mind in order to get past that. And then the right skills with the right tools. So let me just look at this. You can't imagine what you have to do to convince somebody of an investment that test automation is. You may be able to convince your boss with the push the button conversation, but when you go to talk to the projects or the people that you're trying to help with test automation, your stable teams, your agile teams, whatever it happens to be, you can't imagine what you're trying to convince them of. Not only do you have to learn the tool, you have to use the tool, you have to continuously stay in the tool, your head's got to be around this. It's not one of these trivial things. And what happens a lot of times is that people say, oh, it couldn't be but so hard. It's capture replay, right? So we can do that. And then they get into it and realize that it's bigger. It's a deep pit. And so you really need to make sure that your projects, your stable teams are ready for automation. I don't have time to go into too much about what ready for automation is, but don't just let them say, yeah, that's what we need, let's go. All right, that's just not the way to do it. And test automation has its own triple constraint. You have budget, schedule, and scope in a test automation project just as you would in any other project. Okay? Now, one piece of information that I stole shamelessly from Suzanne because she made me very much aware of this is you may have, let me make sure you understand, there's two roles out there. There's an automation specialist and automation architect, right? The specialists are generally more novice than the architect. Is that understood in the Tricentis lingo? Okay. So you have specialists that really want to get out there and start automating. But without some bumpers and guidelines, they can really value speed over quality, and they can produce some really hard things to maintain. So don't let them get out ahead of you and have junk out there for you to clean up later. That hurts you in the long run on the second hill, right? Now, generally people don't tell developers how to code, but I'm amazed at the number of people that want to tell test automators how to write automated tests. Well, you must write it like this so I can understand it. And it's like, no, don't tell me how to write it. Tell me what you need, how to validate this, why you're doing it, and then let me architect the tests. Why is that so important? It's because if the business says, well, I'll just give you this huge spreadsheet of stuff and you just go off and do it just exactly this way, you've built automated tests that they understand but may not be efficient, and they can certainly be problematic. So you just push back and you say, I've got a better data management thing than your Excel spreadsheet. I believe I know what I'm doing. You just help me here on the front end to understand what we're doing. Now, this idea that we are automating tests, I understand it's the speed concept, and I've heard all of that, but the speed concept and the coverage concept kind of has to be tempered with something that says, I need to start with the right value proposition, and it's not coverage, it is risk. And I really applaud Tricentis for trying to flip this paradigm on its head by saying, don't tell me that you've done 10,000, 30,000, my word, 500,000, I can't imagine. Don't tell me that. Tell me what risk you have reduced in my business. And when we get our mindset wrapped around that concept, we realize we don't start with automation, do we? We start with what is the risk, which is back in the requirements. I know a lot of people come up to you and just say, all I want to do is just automate these tests. And you kind of look at them and go, well, do you mind talking to us about requirements? Don't talk to us, we've got requirements. Time out. That's when you really have to start pushing back and saying, we can automate these, sure, fine, but are you sure you're covering the right business risk? And start that conversation. Okay? Change your vocabulary. A lot of times we like to brag about, I've executed this number of tests, I have found these number of defects and that kind of stuff. But next time I challenge you to walk into your boss's office and say, guess what? We reduced your risk by 20%. And he's probably he or she's going to look at you and go, oh my goodness, what in the world are they talking about? And that's the great conversation you want to start. Now, you've heard a lot about this earlier today, and I'm glad that they shamelessly stole from my slides. But start thinking about the testers of the future. And in order to make this agile DevOps stuff work, you either have to get developers to get down into test automation, or you have to get testers to get closer to the developers. These things have to take place. I have a lot of pushback, and I've seen a lot that just says, let me alone, I just want to do manual testing. I worry about their career, okay? Because I know they're comfortable, that kind of stuff, but you've got to gently nudge your organization towards more of I don't want to turn them into developers, but I want to nudge them more towards, I'm going to learn enough development scripting in order to do good test automation. I've got to think sometimes architecturally, structurally like a developer in order to do good test automation, and they're going to need to up their skills in order to get there. Now, the last slide is the one that I really want to highlight for this. I'm sure you said a number of times, I want to keep defects out of production, and that's a very worthy goal. But I like to flip that definition and say, let's do better than that. Let's talk about stability along the whole pipeline, from I've got a great idea all the way out to the customers using it. If I can, as a quality engineer, if you want to call it that, if I can say that's what I'm going to do, then I think I've done a better job than just say I'm going to try to keep bugs out of production. Okay? I'm going like wildfire, believe it or not. I can summarize real quickly, and I might actually be able to take, I've got my 5-minute warning, might be actually take a question. All right, so just let me summarize real quickly. Consider the impact on your budget, scope, schedule of test automation. And if you've not put anything in the budget, and you've not invested in a good architect, and that kind of stuff, ask yourself, is this really, are we ready for automation? Once you get that automation architect in place, let them do their jobs. I can't tell you how much a good automation architect, the value of them being on your team and you getting some mentoring and consulting from that. And I know you may think, well, I'll just bring my people up and they can get trained and that kind of stuff, but it's just not that easy. You need that oversight, that mentorship, that guidance with the bumpers from the automation architects. Change your vocabulary. Start looking at your value proposition rather than your numbers, and then get your automation specialists to up the ante on their skills. All right, there's my contact information, and I will take one question. Susanna says I have maybe 2 minutes. I've got a 2-minute question. Anybody have a question? Cool. Y'all are going to get lunch early then. Thank you very much.